justice spoken mercy over me, over me. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart could fully know how glorious, how beautiful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Powerful, so powerful, your glory fills the skies, your mighty works displayed for all to see, all to see. The beauty of your majesty awakes my heart to sing. How marvelous, how wonderful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Faithful love flowing down from the thorn-covered crown makes me whole, saves my soul, washes whiter than snow. Faithful love calms each fear, reaches down, dries each tear, holds my hand when I can't stand on my own. Faithful love, from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name. Faithful love is a friend just when hope seems to end. Welcome face, sweet embrace, tender touch filled with grace. Faithful love, endless power, living flame, Spirit's fire, burning bright in the night.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining me as we take a look today at Psalm 66. Psalm 66. Now, unlike some of the other Psalms that we've noted, and like some of the others, there's no specific author or occasion noted. Like most Psalms, it tends to be attributed to David. Again, as we've noted, specifically Psalms toward the beginning of the book. But I'll note this from Brother Waycaster, who in turn is taking a note from Adam Clark, a renowned Old Testament commentator. Clark noted this about it. He said it's not attributed to David either by the Hebrew, Chaldee, Syriac, Septuagint, Vulgate, or Ethiopic. So most of the different variations that are out there don't note this. He says the Arabic alone prefixes the name of David. The Vulgate, Septuagint, Ethiopic, and Arabic call it a Psalm of the Resurrection. So if you're using a King James Version like I am, not only is there not an author, there's not an occasion. So you've got one variant out there that attaches an author, David, to it, and some of the others that attach an occasion to it, or I guess a specific, perhaps occasion isn't the right word for its composition, but a particular theme or purpose to it. It says, but for this there is no authority. Quite frankly, I don't know that I really see them. I suppose you could take some of the thoughts and maybe apply it or think of it in that respect. But I agree with Clark. There doesn't seem to be much of a good reason to think that, because by many of the ancients, it is supposed to be a celebration of the restoration from Babylonian captivity. That actually does make sense, I think, although, as he notes in the very next sentence, there are other occasions that others think it commemorates the deliverance of Israel from Egypt, their introduction into the Promised Land. There's a very specific reason in this psalm to think that. It's going to get very specific about that at one point, but to me that seems to be something that it's referencing, as something that had happened in the distant past rather than the occasion for the psalm. But it could be the establishment of the worship of God in Jerusalem. So again, they're perhaps thinking maybe an occasion like when David finally has the Ark of the Covenant moved to Jerusalem. Who knows? Any number of different occasions, different thoughts about. And again, multiple of them could fit. Bottom line, we simply don't know. Okay, so I'll give you, as I always try to do, a bit of a breakdown. I've got my own here that I noted. It aligns very closely to the one that Brother Waycaster uses. The first 4 verses, we've got 20 altogether. The first 4, you have a grand introduction, a call to worship. Verses 5 through 7, the psalmist speaks of God's power over nature. 8 through 12, God's protection through refining trials. 13 through 15 it speaks of worshiping God, and then 16 to 20, closing out the psalm, is something of a personal experience. I suppose one might say a testimony, as it were, the psalmist reflecting upon himself, and that gives a breakdown of it. So not the shortest psalm, but 20 verses here. So we'll go through a note and then observe a couple of things as we come through. So make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Sing forth the honor of his name, make his praise glorious. And say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works. And terrible, not in the sense that we would use the word today, but terrible in the sense of awe-inspiring and just absolutely powerful. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing to thy name. So again, this first 4 verses, this kind of grandiose call to worship. And you have this little word here at the end of verse 4, Selah, which, as we noted before, indicates a pause of sorts. And it's really handy if you're trying to kind of break it down a bit and get something of an outline. It can be very helpful there. So 5 through 7, God's power over nature. Come and see the works of God. He is terrible in his doing toward the children of men. He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the flood on foot. There did we rejoice in him. Again, as I noted a moment ago, deliverance out of Egypt, entrance into the promised land. Here's one reference in verse 7 that clearly points to that. Continuing on, 8 through 12, these refining trials that the people have gone through. Bless our God, ye people. Make the voice of his praise to be heard, which hideth our soul in life, and suffereth not our feet to be moved. For thou, O God, hast proved us, thou hast tried us, as silver is tried. It's a very common analogy here, one that we find in the Old Testament and the New, this idea that the trials and temptations, the difficult things that we go through in life here, speaking of trials that God's people, the Israelites, had gone through, as will be evident in just a moment in verse 12. This idea that there's utility behind it, there's purpose, there's benefit to it. It separates those who are truly faithful, those who are willing to persevere, from those who are not. Again, as silver is tried, you take a precious metal like silver or gold, you subject it to really, really hot temperatures, to the refiner's fire, and it will separate out the pure metal from the contaminants that are in it. Verse 11, thou broughtest into the net, thou laidest affliction upon our loins. Note verse 12 in particular. It says, thou hast caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire, through water, but thou broughtest us out into a wealthy place. It seems to be a rather obvious allusion to, through fire, through the desert wilderness, the trials thereof, through water, crossing Jordan, into a wealthy place, Canaan, the promised land. It's kind of couched a bit in metaphor and imagery, but I think it seems rather apparent. Again, part of the reason why some may want to attribute the psalm to that occasion, but perhaps you agree with me that he's reflecting upon something that had happened in the distant past. Verses 13 through 15, going back a bit, so he's started out with this call to praise, talked about God's power over nature, God's trials of his people that have benefited them, that have proven them, ultimately brought them where they wanted to be. It says, I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee my vows which my lips have uttered. My mouth hath spoken when I was in trouble. Now, this is something that we've noted in a couple of other psalms. How sometimes there's a tendency on people's part to, when things are going rough and you find yourself desperately in need, people will say something like, they'll pray, God, if you'll just get me out of this, just see me through this, and fill in the blank for what follows. I'll build 100 churches in your honor. I'll be at worship every single Sunday. I'll never do blank again that I shouldn't. I mean, the possibilities are endless. But then the tendency sometimes, I would say oftentimes it tends to be the case when this happens. People sometimes, if it isn't completely disingenuous and they just don't even bother at all, maybe it starts out really strong and then over time tends to wane a bit as one gets further and further away from that deliverance, from that providential help. The Book of Judges comes to mind. It's a prime example in multiple iterations of that happening. But he says, I'm going to go to the house unto thy house, God's house, with burnt offerings. I'll pay thee my vows which my lips have uttered, my mouth has spoken when I was in trouble. He's going to make good on it. I will offer unto thee burnt sacrifices of fatlings with the incense of rams. I will offer bullocks with goats. Okay, so reflecting back upon this idea of the need to worship God, and then rounding it out, the last 5 verses, I suppose, with personal reflections. It says, come in here, all ye that fear God, and I will declare what he hath done for my soul. And I'll just note here in passing, sometimes in the church we hesitate to use the word testimony. I guess it's something that's rather popular in denominational circles. Someone says, well, is this an okay thing to do or not? Is there any scriptural basis for it? I would say, personally, the way I would answer that, other preachers may disagree. It kind of depends upon the testimony. And I say this because oftentimes when people use this, they want to take New Testament passages that have to do with divine inspiration and apply it to themselves. So, for example, New Testament writers who were inspired speak about, testifying of God. The thing is, to bear testimony, to bear witness to something. You'll also hear this called, witnessing, right? I'm going to go out and witness in the community. You can only bear witness to something that you yourself have actually seen. So when apostles talk about bearing witness of Jesus, they mean it quite literally. They saw him, they knew him, they walked with him, they worked with him. They can tell others that they can bear witness to the truth of what it is that they're saying because they were there. In fact, you recall this is one of the requirements when we come to the book of Acts of one being counted an apostle. Those who speak by inspiration, likewise can bear first-hand account of something they have that others don't. So when people speak about bearing witness or giving their testimony, what is it they're talking about? If they're using it in that sense, then no, there is something very wrong with that because they haven't personally witnessed Jesus in these miracles the way that the apostles had. However, if you're talking about your own experience, it's like, well, let me share with you what obeying the gospel has done for me, what being a member of the church has done for me, my own personal experience. You have witnessed that. That is something that you can actually speak to in that kind of a sense. And that's what I see here in the last couple verses of Psalm 66, right? The psalmist is reflecting upon himself. He says, I will declare what he hath done for my soul. Right? So the psalmist here is going to bear witness to the power of God, to God's providential care, to what God has done for him personally. So maybe a bit of difference there. It always comes, as I always say, it comes down to what do you mean by it? So be careful, right? Someone says, well, I want to go out and witness in the community. I want to bear testimony. What do you mean by it? Again, if you're using it in some senses, oftentimes it is used that it really is a problematic thing because you cannot bear witness to something you haven't witnessed. Okay, hopefully that clarifies that. It says, I cried unto him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. Verse 18 is interesting. In John's gospel account, we have this, in John chapter 9, this episode with the man born blind who Jesus heals, and then a tumult ensues because the Pharisees, or the Jewish leaders, I should say, want to take it to court and prosecute Jesus as a false prophet over this. They drag the man's parents into it who want nothing to do with it, But in the course of all this, the discussion that goes on with Jesus, the blind man, the leaders, the parents, the whole thing, in the midst of all this, a statement is made. We know that God doesn't hear sinners. That's a controversial statement, and we talked about it a bit during class a few weeks back, so I don't want to sit here and relitigate the entire thing. But I would say that is definitely not literally true. What is meant by that? But if that isn't actually the case, where does that notion come from? Where do the devout Jews of Jesus day get that idea? I don't know, but maybe Psalm 66:18 could potentially be one place where that idea kind of comes from. So if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. Is that literally true on God's part, or is that the psalmist's reflection on his own situation? Just a bit of food for thought there. Verse 19, but verily God hath heard me, he hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from me. Okay, so Psalm 66, overall, a psalm of thanksgiving. That's kind of the general overarching idea here. And the one thing that I'll leave you with, the one thing that kind of stands out most to me about Psalm 66 is that there's an increasingly specific progression with respect to God's power and sovereignty. It starts out in the first 7 verses with all of creation. Then in verses 8 to 12, it narrows down a bit to God's peculiar people, the Israelites. Again, it doesn't explicitly say that, but I think it's rather clear. And you'll note the pronoun there is our, right? Second person, God's peculiar people, our. And then verses 13 and following, it gets even more specific down to the individual, because it goes from our to my. So the last verses of the psalm is with respect to the psalmist personally. So it starts out with God's power and sovereignty and providence for everything, for all of creation, then how it's applied to his people, the Israelites, and then ultimately down to the individual psalmist. So it's rather an interesting thing to note about it. All right, that's Psalm 66. Thanks for taking some time to look at it with me today. Lord willing, next time we will continue on our trek and take a look at Psalm 67. Thank you very much.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? You are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign